Sir Keir Starmer, Your Majesty.
Your Majesty.
You must be utterly exhausted and nearly on your knees, but not actually. Quite a grueling. But a second, yes. Anyway.
Britain is facing a crisis that could shake the very foundations of its government and monarchy. A deepening feud between Prime Minister Keir Starmer and King Charles has erupted into public view, igniting concerns of a full-blown constitutional showdown. At the heart of the conflict is a heated dispute over Ukraine policy, one that pits the monarchy's economic concerns against the government's unwavering stance on military support. The king, alarmed by the potential economic fallout of US President Donald Trump's proposed tariffs, is pushing for a ceasefire in Ukraine, believing it would safeguard Britain's trade relationship with the US and prevent financial devastation. But Starmer refuses to bend, doubling down on his hardline approach against Russia, even as economic warnings grow louder.
Ben, we've been talking about Reform UK. Let's quickly dwell on our dreadful Prime Minister. What do you make of his, in my view, outrageous assertion that if you, me, anybody in Britain feels that there should be a new inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, that somehow we're far right, we're Adolf Hitler, we're nutters, we're climbing on the far right bandwagon. Where on earth did he get that idea from? And I believe in that statement he has made, God Almighty, he's made a lot of mistakes, but I think that statement was the mistake of his political life, to slur anyone in this country who thinks that justice for those victims should be obtained through a public inquiry. To say they're far right is disgraceful.
This extraordinary royal intervention has sent shockwaves through Westminster. The British monarchy traditionally remains above political disputes, but King Charles has shattered that norm by openly pressuring the government. With tensions escalating and public opinion shifting rapidly, the question on everyone's mind is whether this power struggle could spiral into a constitutional crisis capable of toppling Starmer's already fragile leadership. Could the king go beyond mere influence and take drastic action to protect Britain from economic disaster? And why is Starmer willing to risk damaging relations with the United States? The Labour government, which came to power in 2024 with a commanding majority, now finds itself in turmoil. The once purpley disagreements between Starmer and King Charles have burst into the public arena, exposing a rare and dangerous divide at the highest levels of British leadership.
That the other one was, but this one is definitely fiction. And he's sold the rights to the Universal TV, and I'm told it's going to be similar to The Crown. Now, what it is, it's about a press officer who brought in to make a fresh life into fresh life.
As tensions escalate, King Charles has taken an extraordinary step, directly pressuring the Labour government to reconsider its Ukraine policy. His primary concern? The economic devastation that could follow if Britain finds itself on the wrong side of Trump's proposed trade tariffs. With the US as the UK's largest trading partner, punitive measures could cripple industries, wipe out jobs, and send shockwaves through the economy. Inside Buckingham Palace, frustration is mounting. Sources close to the king suggest he sees Starmer's stance as dangerously rigid, a position that ignores the very real economic peril facing British citizens. For Charles, the monarchy's duty extends beyond ceremonial traditions. He believes he has an obligation to warn of impending crises, even if it means breaking with political convention. Starmer, however, has refused to compromise. He maintains that backing Ukraine militarily is a matter of principle, dismissing calls for a softer diplomatic approach as appeasement. His defiance has only deepened the rift between Downing Street and the palace, setting the stage for a confrontation unlike any in modern British history.
A poll out in the Mail on Sunday today shows a third of Brits think Keir Starmer will be toppled within a year, within the next 12 months, while 2/3, they say he's doing badly just 6 months into the job. And there are strong whispers that the PM may even call a general election sooner rather than later. The chief political commentator at the Sunday Times, Tim Shipman, he's a shrewd operator. He wrote today, with potential chaos on the right, some close to Downing Street say conversations have taken place about whether to call an early election in 2027.
The impact of this royal intervention cannot be overstated. The king stepping into political disputes is virtually unheard of, yet here he is, publicly clashing with an elected government over foreign policy. The implications stretch far beyond this single issue, raising serious questions about the evolving role of the monarchy in the modern age. At a time when Labour was supposed to be cementing its authority after its landslide 2024 victory, Starmer instead finds himself in a political quagmire. His government, already battered by multiple crises, is seeing public confidence collapse at an alarming rate. And with the king now seen by many as the voice of economic reason, Starmer's leadership is looking shakier than ever. The numbers tell a grim story for Keir Starmer. Recent polling data paints a picture of a Prime Minister rapidly losing public confidence. His net approval rating has plummeted to 19%, with only 30% of voters expressing satisfaction in his leadership, while 48% disapprove. The dispute over Ukraine has only deepened the divide, with a growing number of Britons viewing King Charles, rather than the Prime Minister, as the more level-headed leader in this crisis.
Angela, what's happening? What's going on?
Well, one of the things I thought was very interesting is that Omid Scobie's written another book. It's fiction, I'm not saying that...
Labour's historic 2024 victory, which ended 14 years of Conservative rule with a commanding 174-seat majority, was expected to bring stability after years of political turmoil. Instead, Starmer's government has been plagued by controversy, and his approval ratings have sunk to historic lows. Many in Westminster now whisper that his leadership is unravelling, and fast. Political analysts see this as a fundamental breakdown in the relationship between the Crown and the government, something that could have serious constitutional consequences. Traditionally, the monarchy stays out of political disputes, but Charles has now put his influence and popularity on the line in a way no modern British monarch has done before. With the economy hanging in the balance and an election still years away, Starmer must find a way to restore his authority. But with the king directly opposing him and public sentiment shifting, the bigger question is whether his leadership can even survive this crisis. At the heart of this growing crisis is Starmer's unwavering commitment to supporting Ukraine militarily, an approach that is increasingly at odds with the new reality in President Trump has made it clear that he wants the war to end quickly, even if it means forcing Ukraine to make territorial concessions to Russia. He has also warned that any country continuing to fund Ukraine's military effort will face severe economic consequences, including steep tariffs on exports to the United States.
Good evening. I start this hour with an urgent appeal in relation to Labour Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Rachel, wherever you are, please come home. Your family misses you. I mean, the country doesn't, but we would appreciate it if you could come back and clean up the flipping mess you've made. Reeves has tanked the economy and she's nowhere to be seen. She didn't turn up to Parliament yesterday.
Performance, I think we've just seen. Which leads me to the question, where is...
For Britain, these threats are more than just political posturing. The US remains the UK's largest trading partner, and Trump's tariffs could send shockwaves through key industries, affecting manufacturing, financial services and agriculture. Yet Starmer has refused to back down, insisting that Britain must maintain its unwavering support for Ukraine, even as economic warnings mount. King Charles, on the other hand, sees the looming trade war as an existential threat. According to insiders, he has urged the government to adopt a more pragmatic approach, one that balances national security with economic stability. His argument is simple: Britain cannot afford to alienate Washington at a time of economic uncertainty. But Starmer, determined to uphold what he sees as Britain's moral obligation to Ukraine, has flatly rejected any suggestion of backing down. This disagreement came to a head during a tense meeting at Buckingham Palace, where what began as a policy discussion quickly turned into a full-blown confrontation. Palace sources say the king pressed Starmer on the economic risks of his Ukraine stance, only for the Prime Minister to dismiss the concerns as outside the king's constitutional role. The response reportedly left Charles furious, believing that his warnings about the country's economic welfare were being ignored.
Yeah, it's a very sort of quick changeover, to say the least. And having to get to grips with everything straight away must be quite... Yeah.
With neither side willing to yield, the standoff has now escalated into a public battle over the direction of British foreign policy. And with economic consequences looming, Starmer's refusal to compromise may come at a steep cost, not just for the economy, but for his own political survival. As the standoff between King Charles and Keir Starmer deepens, The political landscape is shifting in ways the Prime Minister may not have anticipated. Reform UK, the rising right-wing party led by Nigel Farage, has wasted no time in seizing the moment. Farage has publicly aligned himself with the King, positioning Reform UK as the party that stands with the monarchy and the economic interests of working-class Britons. His Majesty understands what Starmer refuses to see, that British jobs and livelihoods must come first, Farage declared in a fiery speech, tapping into the growing unease over Starmer's unwillingness to adjust his Ukraine policy. This unexpected alliance between the monarchy and Reform UK has further isolated Starmer, leaving him exposed to attacks from both traditional Conservatives and disillusioned Labour voters. Many in working-class communities who initially backed Labour for its economic promises now fear the consequences of Trump's tariffs and are increasingly sympathetic to the King's warnings. Meanwhile, within Starmer's own party, cracks are beginning to show. Senior Labour MPs privately admit that they are worried about the economic fallout and the damage this dispute is doing to the party's reputation. Some fear that if Starmer refuses to soften his stance, he could push the government into a deeper crisis, one that Reform UK could exploit to make significant electoral gains. For now, Starmer remains defiant, but the pressure is building from all sides. If the King's intervention continues to sway public opinion and Reform UK continues to rise in the polls, Starmer may soon face the toughest decision of his political career: hold firm and risk a rebellion, or compromise and admit that even the Prime Minister isn't immune to the influence of the monarchy. With tensions escalating, legal and political experts are now debating how far King Charles can go in challenging government policy. While the British monarchy is largely symbolic in modern governance, there are historical precedents for royal intervention during times of national emergency. Some constitutional scholars point to the Crown's reserve powers, which, in theory, could allow the King to push for a change in leadership, or even trigger an early general election, if the government is seen as acting against the national interest.
Afflicted the Tories now for a long time is to really insult the British electorate's intelligence. People watching that interview must have been amazed to hear, for example, that the Tories should now be trusted on immigration because they have experience in immigration. That's like an arsonist turning up at your house, which is ablaze, demanding the opportunity to put it out on the basis that they had the experience of starting it.
However, such a move would be unprecedented in modern British history and would likely ignite a full-scale constitutional crisis. Starmer, aware of the potential ramifications, has remained adamant that the King must stay out of policymaking. But, as public opinion continues shifting in favour of the monarchy, the pressure on the Prime Minister is growing. Dr. Jonathan Harry of the Royal Historical Society has described the situation as uncharted constitutional waters. If Charles believes the country's economic future is truly at risk, he could escalate his involvement in ways that challenge the unwritten rules of Britain's democracy. And the public seems to be backing him. The latest polls reveal that 62% of Britons believe the government should prioritise protecting the economy from US tariffs, even if it means adjusting its stance on Ukraine. Only 24% support Starmer's current approach of providing unwavering military aid, regardless of economic consequences. This divide in public sentiment is a seismic shift that could weaken Starmer's authority even further. For now, the Labour government maintains control, but if the King continues to push against the Prime Minister's policies, and if voters keep siding with the palace over Downing Street, Starmer's leadership could soon become untenable. The key question now is, how far is King Charles willing to go? With Trump's tariffs threatening £32 billion sterling in losses and over 400,000 jobs at risk, the economic stakes are undeniable. King Charles remains firm, urging a shift in Ukraine policy, while Starmer refuses to budge, deepening his isolation. Inside Labour, pressure is mounting. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, already unpopular, may resign if the government stays on this path. Polls show most Britons siding with the King, and whispers of a leadership challenge are growing. Meanwhile, Reform UK is surging, capitalising on voter discontent. Starmer now faces a crucial decision: stand his ground and risk political collapse, or adapt to prevent economic disaster. Either way, this crisis has reshaped Britain's political landscape, with the monarchy asserting influence in ways not seen for generations. Can Starmer survive, or is this the beginning of the end? Britain is entering uncharted waters and the whole world is watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more updates like this.